Well, glad to have you back on the morning show here on Arise News channel with me, Ndi Amugu. Here to join us on all things budget and economics related is Dr. Ayo Teriba. Well, thank you for joining us, and let's jump right into your thoughts on. Let's begin with the size of the budget, 8.612 trillion. That's what the size is. What do you make of the size, by the way, before we begin to break it down?
Well, that's about 8% of the economy. So the federal government is committing to spending about 8% of GDP over the next 1 year. Yeah, it's an issue, but that in itself is not a lot. You should be doing much more than that on recurrent items only, and maybe about that on capital. So it still says, yeah, 8.6 trillion sounds big when you hear it in trillions of naira, but when you relate it to the economy, which is bigger than 100 trillion naira at the moment, then it's small.
Are they playing safe?
Well, it's an issue with the budgeting process. This is the third budget that President Muhammadu Buhari is announcing. He has announced 2016 budget. He came in mid-2015. He has announced 2017 and this 2018. Yes, for an economy in recession, you would have expected, bolder budgetary statements. For an economy that's just coming out of recession, that needs fiscal stimulus, it's small. It's small. Yeah, whether you're looking at the total is small. When you look at the capital and recurrent, it's small. And there are issues about opportunities, to grow the budget that are not being seized upon. But
maybe let's latch onto the issues that you're referring to here, that the administration is not ceasing to grow the economy. Which issues are we talking about here?
Right. Nigeria has huge potentials that the government could seize upon. Yes, the regime has had to grapple with lower oil price.
Yeah. Even though it's beginning to come back up, but last it was at 60-something, but
yes,
the budget is at 45.
Compared with the average of $100 a barrel or more from 2005 to 2014, 60 is a joke. Yeah. For an economy that is used to $100 or more. Yeah, but the key point about what we are missing in under budgeting, as it were, is that in an economy that enjoyed $100 per barrel of oil for a decade, for a full decade, that ended up not having any savings, is an economy in which a lot has been spent, particularly on capital projects. So although government revenue currently is low, government is very rich on assets resulting from the spending, that are taking place. And the most logical thing for the government to do right now will be to turn to those assets and unlock liquidity out of them. I'll give examples.
Please.
Okay. Nigeria, Britain recently relocated a female prison from a high-income location to a low-income location. Building the new facility, they'll build the new facility with a small fraction of the proceeds from the old location, which they now release for luxury apartments.
Okay.
And using the surplus to reduce their debt. So they were not looking for revenue, they were looking to reduce debt. Nigeria has idle facilities in rich locations. We have, for example, a prison facility in Ikoyi, which you could relocate very profitably for government rather than struggling to find 6 trillion. You could unlock perhaps 30 trillion from relocating very simple things like prisons, like barracks, which were originally, ideal military locations, but have now been encroached by bank congestion. But they're in prime locations. You have barracks in Ikoyi, you have barracks in Victoria Island, you have barracks in Ikeja. I'm just illustrating that in the aftermath of a boom in which you did not build any surplus, you have sank capital projects. And the government should logically turn to those capital and unlock them and create revenue out of them to drive the economy. We could have more to say. So I'm saying that instead of borrowing, so the government is getting revenue about 6.6 trillion and borrowing 2 trillion.
We'll get to that.
You could get more from aggressive privatization.
That sounds quite interesting. And what I was wondering, maybe I should ask you that, is it that it hasn't occurred to them, somebody's not thinking, thinking the best way to get out of this logjam? But
well, it's all of us. It's a collective thing. You could have said it. I could have said it. But the point is, the longer we look and absorb the facts, then you begin to reinterpret these issues. So it's never too late, to come up with a fresh idea. And I do think that we should think more seriously of benefiting from the fact that you've just exited a decade or more of heavy spending, of the windfall. Now the windfall is gone. Now you have a shortfall. You're most logical, instead of looking for money to borrow at home or abroad, you should look at those wasteful spending that you have and create liquidity out of them. Yes.
All right. The government has said that part of the budget will be funded using a 500 billion recovered loot. I'm sure you're aware of that. Mm-hmm. What do you make of the funding of the budget? And then maybe we'll look at the total revenue expected from both oil. We talked about oil increasing a little bit now, and then government talks about diversifying, and then you're even talking about non-oil areas. What you just mentioned is one of them. Yeah. So let's look at all that.
Right. The total revenue expected is 6.6 trillion, out of which about 4 trillion is coming from non-oil, and about 2.5 trillion is coming from oil. The oil revenue estimates might be conservative, might be cautious, because the underlying assumption for oil price is $45 a barrel as we speak. Yeah. The market price, the oil price, is about $20 higher than that. So you'd expect that perhaps that oil will contribute more than the 2.5 trillion projected going forward. Where you have uncertainties in the non-oil projections, independent federal government revenue, how much is going to come from loot, the recovery of loot. The non-oil revenue tends to disappoint, particularly in this environment that you are just exiting the recession. Much of the tax projections, just like government revenue suffers shortfalls, so would profit of companies, so would income of individuals. So expecting a lot, from taxation, I will be very, very cautious. But at least 2018 is likely to be a year in which, compared with the preceding 2 years, you are likely to get more than expected from oil. An area where I thought that government should have put more emphasis, to say that expecting about $1 trillion of the non-oil revenue from if you like, privatization. I mean, one is they want to restructure the joint venture holdings of the government in oil. Basically, they expect about $2 billion from that, about 700 billion naira. Then the proceeds of privatization out in the non-oil sector, they expect 300 billion. It's good that we are thinking converting assets to liquidity.
Yeah. But
it's too little. The potentials, for the country, you're talking of an economy, 400 billion economy. You're talking of assets that are probably bigger in value than the economy itself. Then all you want to free is $2 billion. So it's a good step. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, but we should take more steps in that direction, and we should do it very aggressively. That's whether oil or non-oil, looking to create liquidity out of government assets is the way that will lift the budget, that will compensate for the shortfalls in the oil revenue and in the non-oil revenue.
Well, people are concerned, some are concerned, having looked at the budget, the deficit and the debts. Some are thinking, why would you borrow to service? That's a huge concern. It wouldn't do good for the economy, and that seems to be if you like, a minus for the budget. What sense do you make of that?
Yeah, well, it speaks to the heart of the choices that the government must make, and which we seem not to be making. That there's no further headroom in debt. The 2018 budget is proposing to run a deficit of 2 trillion and proposing to spend 2 trillion on debt service. So you are in a situation where the 2 trillion that is going to be borrowed is not going to be spent on the current item, it's not going to be spent on capital item. It's just simply going to be used to service debt. And that tells you you've reached your limit. The only reason you are running deficit is to service debt. You shouldn't be in that situation. Yeah. So, and that speaks to the fact that if you have a revenue shortfall or an income shortfall, if your income fell, now if it's a temporary fall in income, you can borrow your way out of it. If it's a permanent fall in income, as it is in the Nigerian case, we used to earn $100 billion a year in exports for 10 years from 2005 to 2014. We've been struggling to earn 50 billion since 2015. You have a permanent drop in income. You cannot borrow your way out of it. You have to look for non-debt ways of meeting the shortfall. And in very simple, if you like accounting, so your income has shrunk. You could either look at your balance sheet, and increase your liability. Government in borrowing is increasing liability, but is now at the stage where that debt is not sustainable anymore. Instead of debt, you can get equity. The Nigerian government, in the years of the boom, monopolizes infrastructure across the country. Nigeria owns power transmission network 100%, owns Nigerian railway lines 100%, owns gas pipelines 100%. So your income has fallen, but you're not poor. So going to borrow creates the impression that it's not just an income problem, that maybe you are no longer solvent. Turn to the assets that you own and allow others to come and buy part of that equity. You don't need to own them 100%. So get equity, not debt. You can attract investment, particularly foreign investment, as you did in telecoms. So do so in power, do so in rail, do so in gas pipeline, do so in health facilities that are in decay, do so in the education sector. So basically, we need to just look at that debt issue and, put a red flag on it, said, stop borrowing. You are not poor. You are not, without options. Begin to attract equity. And you got it in abundance in telecoms. When you asked, you got it in abundance in LNG. You got it in oil production and exploration. You will get it in power, in rail. Nigeria has the biggest population you can find anywhere in Africa, in Middle East, or in Europe. Where else will you connect 160 million telephone lines?
Well,
investors know that. So give them a chance to come and own this and then stop creating the impression that in a 100 trillion naira economy, the revenue that we can raise is not more than 7 trillion.
A question somebody
Whereas if you allowed equity, you have more revenue. It compensates for the income that has been lost.
Ayo, a question somebody who is watching will ask now is, if this lovely graphical illustration that you're giving is plausible, it's a channel that the government can take, why, what's stopping them?
Well, the government came in with the slogan, change. Okay?
Yeah.
Change is easier said
Done.
than done.
Change is one of the hardest things.
So we've been set in our old ways of doing things, revenue from oil, taxation, debt. We have to free our minds. Oil, revenue from oil has fallen, and that fall is permanent. Taxation in a post-recession economy
is it really permanent?
Is a mirage. No, Nigeria's revenue from oil, if you look at what Nigeria made in the last 15 years from oil, annual average, we are not going to get more than half of that over the next 5 years. Over the next 10, 15 years, it goes to a third because the world is moving away from fossil fuel as a source of energy. So it's not just that there's a glut in the market which OPEC is trying to
use cuts
to prop up the $60 as a result of
the cuts.
So you needed the cartel, to be collusive for you to get $60, something that you were getting $100 or more for free, over a decade. Now, beyond the short-term impact of this production, as demand begins to fall, as cars shift away from petrol, it's going to draw. There's nothing OPEC can do to hold up the price. So the outlook of oil is not encouraging.
It becomes a question of the change we're talking about, which you were talking about before I interrupted.
Yes, so you have to look towards other sources of income. And for Nigeria, it's easy because of decades of wasteful spending that has created assets, much of which are idle. We have stadiums around the country overgrown with grass. Saudi Arabia, in the same situation with Nigeria, listed 16 sectors for privatization, and their target is to raise $200 billion, including sports clubs, including universities, including hospitals. Nigeria needs to do the same. They too have been wealthy, got the windfall from oil, which they invested in those assets. Now that the windfall has given way to a shortfall, they are beginning to unlock liquidity from the asset. And Nigeria is better placed to unlock liquidity than Saudi Arabia.
How better placed?
Very. Saudi Arabia has 40 million people.
Oh, well.
Nigeria has 4 times that, if not 5 times that. Saudi Arabia saved from its own windfall. They created, they had more than 600 billion in external reserves at the time that the oil price dropped. Nigeria did not save, which means that Saudi Arabia did not sink as much into assets that they can now unlock liquidity for as Nigeria.
Nigeria did.
That sank a lot into assets, largely because their own absorptive capacity is smaller. So Nigeria got the money, spent it On its 200 million population, on its 774 local government areas, 36 states. Now, Nigeria should begin to put those assets to unlock liquidity. Like Saudi is doing, but much stronger than
because
Saudi.
We have a better standing than
That's
Saudi.
Right.
Let's look at the assumptions, briefly and a little bit fast. The assumptions in the budget, the oil price, the inflation, the GDP growth, and let's look at those.
Right. I think that the assumptions are sensible.
Okay.
Perhaps a bit cautious in, benchmarking $45 a barrel for oil when the, prevailing price is 64.
Oh, it's gone to 64 now.
It's cautious. It's fine. It's better, to err on the side of caution. Even the exchange rate, 305. If you look at what happened to exchange rate in 2017, we opened the year in January with the parallel market at 500 naira to the dollar. First half of February was 520 naira to the dollar. From the second half of February, the prime market rate has appreciated steadily from 520 to 360, 370. So, and that was in the face of reserves that were below $30 billion until mid-year, when it climbed above 30. It's now at 34. So if reserves of less than 30 to slightly above 30 could see the appreciation of the private market exchange rate, the outlook with the current level of the price of oil, the outlook for 2018 is that you are likely to find the private market converging with the interbank rate of 305.
Doctor,
and you might see an appreciation of the official rate in 2018. So I think 305 is also sensible.
I wish I had all the time, because there are still more things to talk about. Discussing with you at any time is quite interesting on economy. Thank you for being on the morning show.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the morning show. Today, I was just talking to Dr. Ayo Teriba in economics there. I'm Ndi Amugo, thanking you once again, and thanking all my guests too, and to all you at home for being there and watching. All that's left for me to say is enjoy the rest of your weekend, actually, not just your morning, and of course, the rest of your day. Bye-bye.